Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of The Inclusive Consumer, your favorite podcast covering topics at the forefront of every modern marketer's mind, from strategy to social media, content, growth, influencer, partnerships, demographics, psychographic, and of course, my favorite, target marketing. Whether you're a marketing leader or a marketing enthusiast, this podcast is for you. I'm Deborah Walton, your podcast host. I'm the founder and managing partner of Inclusion by Design Co., a consulting firm specializing in inclusive strategy, inclusive marketing, and inclusive product consulting to help organizations increase their revenue and brand reach. My pronouns are she and her. I'm an African American woman with brown skin, dark brown curly hair, dark brown eyes, and I'm wearing tan colored glasses, a gray blouse with a pink pearl necklace in front of a branded background for the Inclusive Consumer Podcast. It is a pink background with the Inclusive Consumer Podcast logo in the top corner. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with that practice, that is a visual description. We want to ensure that listeners from the blind and low vision communities have an inclusive experience, especially when tuning into the podcast on YouTube. As we get started, I want to take a moment and share a land acknowledgement statement. I acknowledge that I am on the ancestral lands of the Cherokee and Shawnee people. I acknowledge these tribes and nations as the rightful and traditional protectors and caretakers of these lands. I encourage you to also learn more about the lands that you are currently on and reflect on your own place in this work. So, this podcast is titled The Inclusive Consumer, and you may be wondering, what is an inclusive consumer? Today's consumers are not going to buy the first product or service they come across. The modern consumer is inclusive. They care about their identity and culture and the identities and cultures of others. And they expect to see companies not only respecting, but also celebrating the dynamic humanity that is reflected in the modern world today. Today's modern consumer is the inclusive consumer. So, on to the podcast episode. Today, I'm joined by Vinny Welsby, a fat activist and DEI leader, and our topic of discussion is all about weight and size inclusive marketing. Let's get this marketing party started. I want to tell you a little bit more about Vinny. Vinny's pronouns, they and them, is a fat activist and diversity, equity, and inclusion leader. They are a world-leading expert on dismantling anti-fat bias and diet culture, a TEDx speaker, podcast host, and best-selling author. Vinny is trans non-binary and is dedicated to shifting how society views fat and queer bodies through education and compassion. When Vinny isn't talking about DEI, they love to snuggle with their dog, cross-stitch swear words, and also sing in a pop choir. Vinny, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Deborah. I'm so excited to be here. And it just reading your introduction, listening to your introduction, it's so cool. And so I want to do a little image description for me as well, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So I'm a white person, fat, with blonde hair, clear glasses with black spots on it. They're very gorgeous. And in the background, you have my apartment with fun pictures on the walls and television. And I am in Vancouver, which is the ancestral, traditional, stolen lands of the Coast Salish peoples, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. And I'm really excited to talk about fat stuff with you today, Deborah.
Lovely. Lovely to have you, Vinny. I'm so excited for this conversation. I just want to review a few quick statistics as we're diving into our chat today.
Yes.
72% of consumers are more likely to purchase from brands that demonstrate a genuine commitment to diversity and inclusion. Now, you may have known that, but for our audience, I'm sure you didn't know that 67% of US women are considered plus size, but the largest size that many retailers offer is typically a 12. The size of the plus size clothing market in 2023 was estimated to be approximately 288 billion with a B billion US dollars, and this was forecast to increase over the next decade, surpassing $500 billion in 2033. So this is what we're talking about. This is not a small amount of numbers, and we're not talking about anything small here, whether we're looking
Uh-uh.
at the size of the people, we're looking at the size of the spending power, or the billion-dollar industry.
Yes, exactly. Like fat people, we have money. We want to buy stuff and we want to see ourselves represented in marketing. And it is bananas to me why companies leave so much money on the table and ignore fat people. And I hope it's not because they think that fat people are gross and they don't want to market to us. They don't want us as customers, but sometimes it feels like that.
And that's what we have to talk about today. For all the marketers out there listening, this is really your wake up call to think about things differently. Every person, every human really deserves and they should be reflected in your marketing with not only respect and dignity, but also just celebrating the authenticity that they have. So, we really want to dive into this fun conversation. My first question for you, Vinny: what is anti-fat bias and why is it important in marketing and branding?
Yeah, so anti-fat bias is the lens and the waters that we all live in, and it is that idea that fat people or fatness is bad or unattractive or unworthy or unhealthy. And a lot of people don't know that they have this bias because they think it's okay to think less of fat people because it's all about health. But a lot of that is based on bias. And a lot of times, people who are more forward thinking, they can think very generously towards fat folks. But when it comes to their own body, that's when their bias really is easy to spot because they will not allow themselves to have a bigger body, or if they do have a bigger body, a lot of times they desperately don't want to have a bigger body. So a lot of times it's internalized or internalized bias towards yourself or internalized privilege because of the size of your body. And then those underlying beliefs that we have in society that fat people are just less than, which is not true.
Absolutely. No one is less than anyone else. We are all humans. We are all the same.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's interesting is that there are so many labels and so many divisions, which sometimes it can be helpful to have a label. Okay, so this podcast is all about marketing. This podcast has a label. Sometimes having labels is helpful if it's empowering, if it's for an organizational purpose to help people navigate, right? But when we have negative labels and when we are taking action, not only based on bias, but also privilege, now we are harming and causing harm to others. And that's what we want to avoid, not only in the workplace, but also in our marketing and branding.
Yeah, exactly. Nail on the head, Devereaux.
Love it. Thank you. So, Vinny, what we know that weight is a protected class in several US locations. I really want to hear you talk a little bit more about that. What states are they and why is this important?
Yeah, so a lot of people do not know this, which is interesting. But even from the 90s, we've had laws to protect fat folks. So we've got laws in Binghamton, New York, Madison, Wisconsin, Michigan State, New York City, San Francisco, Santa Cruz, Urbana, Illinois, Washington, D.C. And we've also had legal cases, legal guidance in the state of California and the state of Washington. And that's protecting weight and height. So the little people are also lobbying with fat folks to get these laws passed to protect body size and height. And the reason why it's important is that we're no longer as a society saying it's acceptable to say I'm not going to hire you because you're fat. I'm not going to rent a house to you because you're fat. And laws are now finally catching up. The other thing is companies don't know that fatness a lot of times is a protected class in regards to is fatness a disabling characteristic? And if it is, then fatness would be protected under disability rights. And so they leave themselves open to litigation. They also are not talking about body size in DEI efforts. When exactly like you said at the beginning, most people are in bigger bodies. So to me, it's really surprising that we're not talking about this. We seem to be unaware as a society about the legal protections. And people who are smart, people who are on the cutting edge of inclusion are thinking about this because this is the future. Fat liberation is the future. And we're going to see more and more laws being passed to protect people of all sizes.
Love it. And I think that's so important when we're thinking about why this body of work is not really a moral imperative. This is the reality of where we are in the world. And if we're going to be inclusive, that means truly being inclusive. We don't pick and choose, cherry pick certain people or certain groups and let others feel harmed or cause harm to others. I think it's really important that when we're thinking about inclusion, we're being intentional and authentic with it in order to really get it right.
Yeah. And you know what? Talking about the marketing side of things, you know who sponsors and who helps out? It's Flair is the Fat Legal Rights organization, but there's a company that helps out, and that's Dove. So Dove sponsors and helps out getting those laws passed. Now, talk about inclusive marketing and literally being at the source and changing the way that we think about fat folks. And Dove is doing an amazing job. Now, Dove is not perfect. They've done lots of unfortunate things, but this is a company who gets it, who is listening to fat folks and putting their money where their mouth is. And so this is a company that's really kind of hitting the nail on the head when it comes to inclusive marketing, but not always, but not always.
They're on the right track and they're
Yes.
definitely walking the walk. And I think every brand is certainly going to have an opportunity and a time when they get it wrong. That's part of the work of being authentic and really being able to connect with real people. We're not talking about AI and bots. We're talking about real human people in the world. And I think every brand certainly will have a time when they have to take ownership, acknowledge, and apologize for a mistake or something landing wrong. But as long as they're making an effort and especially being consistent in really prioritizing inclusive marketing, I think that's where we start to see other brands look at the success of organizations like Dove. I think that's a perfect example.
Yeah. So thanks to Dove for doing that.
Thank you to Dove. I'd
Yeah.
love to work with Dove on some more of their inclusive marketing campaigns because I doubt they're stopping anytime soon. That's just a
No,
part of their
no.
brand.
Exactly.
So, Vinny, you bring up a really good point around the fashion and the beauty industry. So, with Dove being, one of those beauty brands, what about other brands? What about other industries? Can other industries besides fashion and beauty really benefit from size and weight inclusive marketing?
Oh my goodness. Yes, 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 yes. So a brand that I really like for their size inclusion is Fenty, which is Rihanna. Rihanna? What's her name?
Rihanna, yeah, yeah.
Rihanna. Her makeup brand, and she has clothing out of that brand too. The models that she uses in her runway shows and also for product images, they are so counterculture cool because fatness is counterculture. Fatness is really visually interesting. She uses fat folks who are not the quote acceptable fatties. So where a mistake that a lot of brands make is that they'll say, yeah, we'll use some plus size models, but they'll be like a size 14 and they'll be white and they'll have a perfect hourglass shape and small waist, big bum, big breasts, European features, all young, all of that type of stuff. And so Fenty will use people who are super fat people and disabled people and older people, and it's so cool. It's so cool to see, and also it's so cool, it's edgy, and it's amazing. So Fenty is one I really like, and there's a lot of different companies within the plus size world that are really listening to fat folks. And here's the problem is a lot of times companies will engage in inclusive marketing and think, okay, we'll market some fat stuff. They won't talk to fat people, they won't have a fat consultant. They'll just listen to the people that they've already got. They'll release some brand or some line that is considering fat folks, and then it flops. And the reason that it flops is because it'll be ugly. It'll be like, well, what do fat people like? They'll be like, fat people like really unfashionable clothes and boring things, and that's not true. We like some fashion. And they won't consult with the fat community and say, hey, we really want to do this brand, and this is coming. And so a lot of times companies will say, well, fat stuff doesn't sell because they've launched it and no one's bought it because they don't know about it and they've not consulted the fat community. So that's the thing with Dove, is that they have spoken to the fat community, and that's what companies need to do. And you know what? I realized that I totally just went off on a tangent there. I'm not sure I've even answered your question.
Yeah, no, this is great. I love the insight. And I think this is a really good point for a lot of the marketers who have been listening to the Inclusive Consumer podcast for more than one episode. They're picking up on the theme of not only the reason why representation matters, but also the process of getting inclusive marketing right. Part of that, there's a lot of nuances, but part of really being able to hit a home run and dial in inclusive marketing in a positive and an authentic way is co-creation. So being
Yeah.
able to work with, not just telling or not talking to a particular consumer segment, but co-creation to get feedback and build something together that can really be great for the community that they're trying to sell to.
Yeah. And especially a brand that's known for not being inclusive. um they have to be intentional if they want to market to the fat community. They have to be really intentional so that they can succeed, and we desperately want them to succeed. The fat community, if a brand is putting stuff out there talking to fat people, we want them to succeed and we will buy that stuff, but we won't know about it unless if that companies are traditionally only marketed to thin people. There's kind of like a fracture and a relationship that needs to be built. And it's not like build it and they will come. It's build it, let's build some trust as well, and we will come.
And the brand loyalty, once you establish that, the bottom line is really going to show the results.
Mm.
So building the trust, and then the benefit of that is having the brand loyalty.
Yeah. And one example of a company that didn't do this well is Old Navy. So Old Navy, they traditionally went up to about size 20 in the stores. And so then they came out with this whole new campaign called the Everybody campaign. And they said, we're going to carry it to size 30 in the stores. And so the fat community was like, fuck yes, we are going into the store. And you know what happened is that they rolled it out really badly. So every time, not every time, most of the time that fat people went to the store, they didn't have any sizes. They had like only up to a size 20, and they said, sorry, all of the larger sizes are online only. And so the fat community was like, what the fuck? This huge marketing campaign saying we serve everybody. And it was like, sorry, we can't serve you in store, only online. And that was really disappointing. And then Old Navy withdrew from that market segment and said, we're not going to cover that anymore because it wasn't successful. And it wasn't successful because it didn't have the clothes in the store. So...
It goes back to intention. I mean, you really have to be intentional every step of the way to flawlessly execute a really inclusive marketing campaign or marketing initiative. And it really shouldn't be in 2024, inclusive marketing should not be something off to the side, something that one person over in a corner is doing. It should be how you are approaching your marketing efforts.
Yeah, it should be the core of it. And to me, going back to that countercultural thing, marketing that's not thinking about inclusion is so boring. I don't know about you, Deborah, but when you see like some campaign and it's like some thin young white woman smiling, putting on a lipstick, snooze fest. Like, yeah, sure, we want to include lots of different types of people, but imagine if it was like some queer, trans, black, disabled person putting on some lipstick. Now that would stop you in your tracks and say, look at that. That's so exciting. So yeah, it's just boring. Let's make it more fun.
Let's have more fun and let's be more memorable because the
Mm.
remarkable brands are making a difference. The fact that you've talked about Fenty and that's something that really stayed with you, you're not the only person, Vinny. There are other people who are positively impacted by what Fenty is doing. And so that again, that leads to brand recognition. There's so many different things that marketers can be doing to really generate positive benefits that are not just, oh, this is nice, let's talk about it, we scored a win. It's going to financially transition into more dollars for your organization. You want to
Mm-hmm.
drive revenue, brand loyalty, brand recognition. All of these things are really important and they help to really give you a competitive advantage in the crowded marketplace where, again, consumers have choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe you know this answer. I would love to pick the brain of a marketing team who has refused to feature fat folks and what their reason is. Like, what do you think it might be, Deborah?
Yeah, well, I definitely have had a couple of conversations with marketers that are not really worried about segmenting. They don't want to do target marketing. They really just want to do mass marketing efforts. And it comes down to cost. I think
Mm.
that when we're looking at how we're making investments of our time and our resources as marketers, it's really important that we're also looking at the return. We don't just
Mm.
pick and choose and decide how we're going to invest without thinking about what we're getting on the other side of that. And I think that's what's neglected. We're not thinking about the buying power of these segments. We're not thinking about the fact that everyone in the world, when we think about the global economy, if they are not in an underrepresented group, they have a family member, a friend, a parent, a neighbor. They have someone in their life that they love. So adjacent to these underrepresented communities. So it's really not just, okay, well, we want to get, the Black dollar, we want to get the Latina dollar, we want to get the Gen Z dollar. We really want to think about the opportunity to get more sales, drive more revenue from having positive, authentic, celebrated diversity because you're not going to target just one particular audience when you're really focused on representing them authentically and respectfully in your campaigns.
That's a good point. Even if you're showing someone, even if I saw in a marketing campaign someone that wasn't like me, who was, I'm white, say if someone who was a racialized person or someone who, other identities that I don't share, but they're marginalized, I would still think, oh, this brand is for me because they're featuring marginalized folks. So yeah, it's kind of it. I don't want to say two birds with one stone because that's like mean to birds, but you're covering many bases by saying, by featuring any type of marginalized individuals.
Yes, and I think brands need to be thinking about going beyond just gender because typically what I've seen is, oh, well, we have a white male, we have a white female, and so we're, checking all the boxes.
Yeah.
No, no, you're not.
Yeah.
That's not where it stops.
Yeah, my goodness, that's so funny. Yeah, we got one of each, so we're good.
Yeah, yeah. It can't be
No.
about box checking. It has to be intentional. And I think what you said earlier is just so important. The co-creation, being able to invite, have community really working with you side by side as a partner in order to really be able to provide a product or service that's going to serve the community well.
Yeah. And the other thing on that as well, having the community, making sure that you're speaking to folks who are committed to the liberation of that community versus folks who are committed to denying the humanity of that community. So, for example, in the fat world, there are a lot of people who advocate for fatness to be erased, to get solutions to quote cure fatness, and so this would be kind of the equivalent of autism speaks. So you know autism speaks of like, you know, autistic people need to go away. And so there's a lot of companies who are funded by pharmaceutical companies. They look like they're advocating for fat folks, but actually they're just pushing the erasure of fat folks. So making sure that we're actually talking to those people and groups who are advocating for the actual human rights of fat folks, and not get scammed by one of these grassroots fake pharmaceutical company mouthpieces, because that sometimes happens. For example, with the movie The Whale, they consulted a group that was funded by the pharmaceutical company, and so they patted themselves on their back saying, we've spoken to the fat community, but they'd spoken to pharmaceutical company who was dedicated to erasing fat folks. And so the movie The Whale was like a pity piece on how disgusting and horrible fat people were, because they didn't speak to the right people in the fat community.
Yeah, that you have to really do your due diligence. And I think, you know, going back to your question around why are brands and marketers really not prioritizing inclusive marketing, I think it's because it takes effort. Mass market,
Yeah.
mass marketing is easy. Okay, we want to sell this widget. Let's do one advertisement and blast it off everywhere. Okay, well, I mean, you can do that, but you're certainly going to really waste a lot of time and money by not targeting and not being authentic with the dynamic diversity that we have in the world today.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's interesting. I had never thought it from that point of view, but that's so obvious. It's money.
Everything comes down to money, but when we think about the buying power of a lot of these really powerful segments that are being completely ignored, frankly, the brands who are going to pay attention are going to be the brands that get the dollar. They're going to be the brands that get the loyalty. So then
Yeah.
in 5 years or 10 years, when a lot of these other organizations wake up and they say, okay, well, now we want to do some inclusive marketing. Sorry, I'm
Yeah.
loyal to ABC company and I'm not leaving.
Exactly.
They've got me for life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's smart. Even though it might cost a little bit more money, it's smart.
It's a smart thing to do. So do what's
Mhm.
smart, not necessarily what's easy or what's cheapest, if I
Yeah.
could even say it that way. But I'm sure if you look at the numbers, doing targeted marketing in an inclusive and in authentic and inclusive way is probably about the same in terms of media placements and tactics for campaigns and advertising. I would think it's just dividing up the time rather than just slapping one thing out there.
Exactly.
So, Vinny, I've seen a few articles really reference how fat phobia is taught to us from society and from the media. So, for a marketer out there who has fat phobia, really wants to be more inclusive, what can they do to celebrate and embrace body positivity?
Yeah, I mean, oh my goodness. We have all got stories, depending on your age, of seeing marketing and media from our childhood and now that was egregiously anti-fat. And it you know, like there's, you know, so all the videos you see online of, you know, what's her name, Tyra Banks, and America's Next Top Model. Did you used to watch that, Deborah? I watched that every single season. I fucking loved that show.
I
But
did. I watched it.
yeah.
Tyra used to be like the person that was my goal role model.
Yes, yes. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Yes. And I would always, you know, but they're judging the models being like, yeah, oh my goodness, they're so fat, and oh my God, they're too short. And anyway, that type of media was just so normal. Now it's a little bit kinda in quotation marks, but still not great. Still, there's so much media that I watch, and I can't watch because it's just only focused on thin, white, young, beautiful people. And I just find it really boring and oppressive. Anyway, so we all have anti-fat bias, right? So if someone's listening thinking, I'm not sure if I'm really biased towards fat folks, we all are. It's just impossible. I've been working on this stuff for years, and still, some little anti-fat belief will pop up in my head, and I'll be like, well, I thought I'd got rid of you. So going with that idea in your mind as you are marketing, knowing I do have bias, and how is it coming out in this campaign that I'm working on? And one of those ways is looking for only people who are palatably fat. So we mentioned that before. So someone who has a lot of privilege in lots of different areas, but they might have a slightly soft body. So really finding people who are marginalized in many different ways, and including those types of people, talking to the community, and understanding what it is that we want. And what we want is fun, fashionable, cool things, just like straight size people. So yeah. Did I answer the question?
Absolutely. And I think this is really a good opportunity for marketers to think about the dynamic ways to be more size inclusive. So it's creating products, whether it's, beauty, fashion, but it's also the advertising, right? Because I could think about a million things that we just all buy in an annual basis, whether it's furniture, cars, electronics. Why do we see the same people over and over when those people are not the only ones that are buying? And so,
Yeah.
to your point, I think to be more dynamic and really help overcome the advertising fatigue that a lot of people have, we really have to start telling more enriching stories to be more memorable. And that
Yeah.
comes down to really having diversity in what you're sharing from a marketing and branding perspective.
And you know what it's made me think of is this, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be marketing a product that is about the body, like in
Yep.
clothes or makeup or whatever. There's a Canadian company called Cozy. They make sofas. And recently they've been targeting the fat community, and I love it. And so they've recognized that some of their sofas you can either get in a normal, like a regular size, or a little bit deeper. So the seat is deeper. Now, not necessarily for fat folks, but bonus, fat folks might want more space on the sofa. And so they've been contacting fat influencers and getting them to make a short little video. I just bought a cozy sofa. And I didn't buy one of the ones which is quote for fat folks. I just bought a regular one. But their marketing of them realizing we have something here that is beneficial and could speak to the fat community, and we're going to use fat influencers who are showing the product in an authentic way. Is just, it made me buy a freaking $1,800 sofa. So, because I was like, Cozy loves the fats, so I'm gonna buy a sofa for them. I needed a sofa anyway, but yeah. So that was really cool to see.
Love it. So, for all of the marketers out there, you just heard a success story of how inclusive marketing works. It's
Yes.
not just a moral thing to do because we want to be nice and friendly. It is the thing to do because it's how you can drive revenue. It's your growth marketing strategy. So, there you
Mm-hmm.
have it.
Yeah, there you go. Successful. I didn't even think about that. Now I'm like, thanks, Cozy, for my sofa that I paid with my money for.
Love it. Well, Cozy's another brand for marketers to watch and really get some ideas and inspiration for how to get inclusive marketing done right. Well, this has been
Mm-hmm.
such an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Inclusive Consumer Podcast, Vinny. This was really insightful. And I know someone out there was taking some great notes. So thank you for
Mm.
sharing your wisdom.
Thanks, Deborah, for having me. You're the best.
Love it. Well, if you want to check out Vinny and follow along on social media, reach out for services, get a consultation, all of the links will be in the show notes for you to easily access and reach out. And if you liked this episode of The Inclusive Consumer, please subscribe, write us a positive review, and tell a friend. If you're facing some marketing challenges, whether you're launching a new product, you want to increase your revenue, increase your brand reach, or really just it's time to hit the reset button on your marketing, we can help. Feel free to reach out to my team and I at inclusionbydesignco.com/contact-us. We're happy to give you a free strategy session with a homepage website audit, social media profile audit, learn more about your goals and how we can help. With that, we will go ahead and conclude the episode for today and really looking forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye, everyone.
Bye.